Hey Dan, welcome to the Tech Recruitment podcast. I'm super excited about welcoming you to this show because you have so much experience. You are the top 100 global leader in the recruiting industry, and it's just so cool to learn from your experience. So, why don't you tell the audience about where are you coming from? Kind of with your background, you are invested in different companies in the recruiting space. So tell us more about you first.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really impressive to see where this show has grown over the last couple of years too. So congratulations. But yeah, I've been in the industry close to 13 years. I'm only 36, so it's over a third of my life that I've dedicated to this industry. And I joke around, there's not a lot that I know, but this is one thing I do know. But yeah, I've been very fortunate over that 13-year span. I started out actually as just like most people on the show, a generalized recruiter and what we call the consultant at Randstad. In a short period of time, I grew from basically that desk to being a top leading VP for them. Primarily light industrial, blue collar has been the space that I've spent the most time in. However, since 2017, I've basically been involved in 4 different startup groups, mostly firm based, still true to blue collar, skilled trades, gone through a couple successful exits. 2020 is really the first company I got involved in that we started from scratch with the goal in mind to kind of grow into an enterprise business, which is my current role as Chief Vision Officer for Shift Fillers and Staffing A to Z. Um, it was really interesting when we started that company. It's just we started right at the beginning of COVID, and so we were already basically a group of people that were kind of known for industry leaders, specifically to technology and innovation, and kind of leading edge on that side in the industry. But COVID obviously expedited, how much of that adopted quickly. So over the last couple of years, that's been really where I've spent a lot of my time. We've grown to being one of the fastest growing companies in North America. We also went through a successful shareholder purchase with a group formerly known as Ian Martin Group called Raise, which was really exciting for us because that gave me, more of the skilled trades and professional side of the market, which is really where their nuts and bolts have been. It also got me introduced to things like direct sourcing and some other things that you're really seeing prevalent in the market that are also leading with technology. And then in 2018, before I came into Shift Fillers, really started Oak City Advisors, which is I'm the current president of and owner. And we really focus on actually working with a lot of agency owners and different people that are interested in learning and adapting technology, but don't necessarily know where to start. So we focus primarily on cloud server architecture, design and configuration, and helping people break out of what we call kind of that P2P or product marketplace into actually owning their own data and using, kind of that structure as more of a data lake to help, with third-party integrations and actually bringing more things into native systems. And really, for me, that's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to take people's problems and turn them into, success stories and more automation. And as I like to say, getting the business owners to work on the business, not in the business that most of us live day to day.
Awesome. Well, that's just so cool. And I like how you just casually mentioned, I went through 3 or 4 successful exits. I mean, that's, a lot of people are dreaming about just one successful exit, and you are kind of casually mentioning 3 or 4. It's just so cool. So a lot of people in our community, they are kind of wondering how to go from being freelance recruiters to maybe having the staffing or recruiting agency at one day. So kind of your experience is very valuable. But why don't we kind of take it step by step? There are people who are kind of freelancers. They look for some opportunities to make money in tech recruiting or staffing. So with all your experience now, what would you say they should do? Like, what are some of the ways to make money in recruiting these days?
Yeah, absolutely. One, I'll just say I can relate to a lot of what they're going through because it's not a very much different path. Obviously, I was a little spoiled growing up in the first, largest staffing company in the world. So I learned a lot of principles, and I joke around, but I still have those blue veins from Randstad with the core principles that help me kind of shape who I am today. However, when I made the transition from Randstad to kind of the independency side, right? There's a lot of what we'll talk about today is like I'm a really big firm believer in collaboration. And so, one of my major strengths that opened up a lot of opportunities for me, was the power of networking. and also kind of knowing what communities or what things are out there, that can help elevate and kind of expedite, you getting started. So when I first started, the main thing I did was, I really enjoyed perm placements, which most of us enjoy, kind of those wins and the dollar amounts that come with those successful placements, and just being able to find what I like to call those needle in a haystack kind of people for our clients that entrust us with that. So there are some tools though out there, that I started with. So, you've got things like Bounty Jobs and other, sites that you can find, easy marketplaces that have recs that are available. You can sign independent agreements, typically some type of fee splitting, electronically. And nowadays, that's not just based in the US, there's global opportunities through a lot of those things. The second thing is, I used Upshift actually a lot, to be able to kind of go into those ecosystems or excuse me, Upwork, where you could go in and basically just freelance for companies based on skills or things that you were really good at. One of the skills that I use the most is actually sales and sales, like content creation. There's a lot of people that struggle just being able to open doors and things of that nature. So, those were really easy ancillary kind of income streams for me. I've been really good at being able to open up huge opportunities. The third is actually through like MSP or agency relationships. Depending on the niche, the background, the types of things that people may have, in this community, you're still able to call and reach out to those firms and do SOWs or other things, that may be very specific to areas that they need help. The reality is most of those companies still own a large saturation of the volume and orders that go through our industry. And none of us are filling 100% of the roles. So a lot of them tend to be open. However, behind that, there's also tons of communities. Like I'm in pretty much every recruiter group that there exists in LinkedIn and Facebook and WhatsApp. And, a lot of that just comes through being willing to take a conversation or being willing to kind of throw yourself out there with what your skills are. Chances are somebody somewhere is struggling. And in most of these groups, there's hundreds of thousands of us, that are open to at least, kind of, taking calls and seeing if there's things out there, people out there that kind of meet the demand that maybe we're not fulfilling in-house. So those would be my low-hanging fruit ones that are pretty easy to start with.
Interesting how kind of you see the world full of possibilities and opportunities, and people who are looking for a job for a few months, they are probably in a different mindset of like, hey, the opportunities are not there, companies are not hiring, the permanent placement is no longer happening because companies are cutting budgets. So with regards to these perm placements that you also mentioned, do you see on the market a decline of perm placements? And if yes, then into what extent?
Sure. I do see it. I mean, just overall historic, like last year, 2 years, right? Depending on the verticals, a lot of things are starting to stabilize post-COVID. So COVID obviously expedited a lot of things like healthcare and some other markets. However, unfortunately, because of either supply chain issue or other just markets being down, we have started to see quite a bit of, kind of downturn dependent on, vertical. However, there are plenty that are still growing, right? So even though healthcare is stabilized, it's really a 2% decline. These are all post-COVID, so it's still very much exaggerated growth over the last couple of years to what it was, say, in 2017, or pre-17. So the other things, though, are like net new markets that we're starting to see kind of come through, right? So, I think the more niche that you get, especially as an independent person, the more opportunity you have, because we're not all necessarily struggling, say, in the light industrial, commercial, or hospitality side. It's just changing how you have to work with those people, but the volumes of candidates are still very much accessible. From a company buying perspective, though, they tend to like getting into the niches that are not always accessible. So for me personally, when I was independent, not on the firm side, I had a niche focus for like maintenance mechanics, automation technicians, skilled machinists. There was not a high saturation of that. So it was easier for me to open up doors going to companies, being able to say, I specifically work and specialize in this area. And that then automatically made my sales call different than the other 200 calls they were getting day to day. And, right now I see the same amount of growth coming from construction in the US, Oil and gas is still very much booming in the Canada markets. You still have healthcare still growing, but it's different verticals of healthcare. You have IT a little bit on a decline, but like I'll use, everybody's talking about AI today. So AI roles, it's kind of, I'll say it's a little comical. We're basically hiring to build tools that potentially replace most of us down the road. However, that need is still exponential when you look at that over the next 5 to 6 years. And then the other thing in healthcare that I'll mention is like home health. Right. And especially in the US, we have a huge aging population, that essentially is starting to flip our actuarial tables, that essentially now you're going to have this, whole pot of money that's been premium paid. Now you're, 10xing the amount of, baby boomers and people that are coming into those markets. So it's going to put that much more pressure, potentially on home health aid, nursing homes and availability to care. So, I would just say there's a lot of those types of reports within SIA, ASA, job trend reports. So if you're trying to struggle or you just feel like maybe you're stretched out, pay attention to where the growth's going to come from. Try to get your specialty niche into those things. Build your candidate pools, because it really isn't a lot of effort to start engaging and getting those people into what I like to call these talent communities, which is really our job to build, and then being able to go showcase that back and using that as the sales breakthrough to potentially get into some of those bigger relationships.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned so many different things and very interesting ones that I don't even know which one to follow up with. I'll probably choose the talent community, which was the last, and then we will kind of go back to the niches, because that's also what kind of we also see people discuss quite a lot in our community. So with regards to the talent pool or the talent community, what can one imagine when you say a talent pool? I mean, is it just a database, or is it kind of being in touch with people and facilitating some events?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'll try to articulate this well. And so for me, a talent community is basically not just the recruiting aspect and a database. It's actually driving what we call, a lot of times talent engagement, right? So for me, it's having a tool or resource, that can be basically an ERP or an applicant tracking system that allows you kind of to kind of go end to end in some regard. But the most important layers of it is it's easy ways to attract, engage, right? And then redeploy. The redeploy aspect for me is one that always gets neglected in that conversation. However, when you move from, say, solopreneurship and more perm focused into agency and more the ongoing traditional fills and trends, our cost gets way more reduced the longer I retain somebody on assignment, right? Things like SUTA and, other things that you may get for opportunity tax credits and other things that become the ancillaries behind just your margin and revenue. Those things come with being able to actively engage and communicate. So for me, what we're seeing a lot in the enterprise markets of these things is like adoption of, say, like direct sourcing or, globalized talent communities, which essentially are, things where you're being able to, kind of recruit, or like I like to call the RPO of contingent labor, that essentially you're getting permission to use client brand. And that's using that as a fuel to attract people into these communities. But then it's more things like, I'm on the board for a company called Staffing Referrals. So it's now taking principles of, how you're recruiting, but then using ancillary tools to drive engagement, additional revenue opportunity for your candidate database, easier ways to share and close what we call this marketplace of jobs and candidates, and showcasing that, some of it is redeploying. So, one of my largest clients is like a HelloFresh and has a competing or like an internal brand that they compete with, obviously in a market, say with Factor. They have two facilities, they're 10 miles apart. So, instead of having to put so much pressure on the top of the funnel and constantly reinvesting in job boards and all those things, to me, it's like that talent community. You're bringing people in, you're using referrals, you're driving the cost per unit down, that essentially takes pressure off these other ancillaries. But the main component is engagement and being able to quickly get to those people, without having to go touch 6 different systems or, any other manual means of engaging them into, here's my job. Are you interested? If not, who do you know? And then using all those other things to really enhance the what I call that user experience.
Awesome, awesome. So one aspect of this talent community is the access, right? So a recruiter needs to have access through an email or a phone. Could be a WhatsApp group probably or something, right? Where the message can be quickly sent. But then the other aspect could be organization of some events or maybe some live kind of events or whatever, in-person events. So would you say what's in other words, like what's the border line that we should, or the line that we should draw in the sand, like what to do in terms of facilitating the community, like how far to go, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is going to be very different based on your audience between solopreneur and firm, right? And like the size of those, right? For me personally, even though we're a startup, we still compete personally on the shift filler side with the Ronstadts, the Manpowers, the Adecos, because of the kind of service offering we've developed. So let me try to break it up a little bit into that. From a solopreneur, right? We all know we're basically competing against multiple solopreneurs or agencies to fill the same role. So in those kind of things, it's more important to be working on building your database, having a seamless ATS, that essentially gives you the ability to post a job, get a candidate in, or if you have the database behind you, being able to advocate the job quickly. Secondarily to then, right now it's actually the qualifying mechanisms. So that's to me where you see the most adoption of AI today, which is really helping in that pre-screen and vetting process so that like I always use this saying, best friend of mine, Justin Clark from F-Staff told me a long time ago, technology always works best when technology and people work together. So we know that this is still a person business, right? Like people's business. You still have to have that empathy, be able to communicate. However, when you get that, now somebody engaged, it's now the qualifying, being able to qualify to that job order and making those positions, or kind of nominations or, submissions quickly so that you're getting a priority before this person's getting called by 5 other agencies that are all working on the same role. Mm-hmm. Then it gets into more, like kind of split to enterprise. Enterprise now is, when you start getting more volume in the contractual things, meaning, I'm getting recs and, shift fillers right now for 200, 300, 500 people sometimes in a week. Well, how do you get to those large volumes of people without having to go, through the manual steps of database and talent statuses and onboarding statuses and where these people are relative to being able to get them into the seat? That's really what I go back to this talent community and where direct sourcing does really well as you're embracing those principles. Typically, you're getting all the benefits of an ATS, plus you're getting these communication things from a centralized system that's at least giving you then the competitive advantage to being able to get these large people to say, hey, I'm interested, and then put workflows behind that way faster than, say, your old school traditional brick and mortars that are very, kind of communitized based on a region, a market, where they're not allowed to go out of, right? Those are really where you get into more of the benefits of those. And by doing that, you tend to be able to price more competitively because, like, it's kind of back to this cost per unit. If those people are typically working for an agency on average 13 weeks or a 90-day assignment, in this case, they tend to come back into the community in a shortened kind of assignment role. And now you're basically working on going back to that HelloFresh Factor brand. Maybe they rolled off a HelloFresh, but I can move them over to a Factor facility. Now I'm basically keeping them engaged, and I may be elongating the candidate life cycle of that from 13 weeks to a year. That's a big difference in profitability when you get into the agency levels.
Yeah, interesting. Very cool. And with regards to the community, you also mentioned that recruiting is a people business, human, a human to human kind of a business, peer to peer. So with regards to the brand of the business of solopreneurs, like, would you advise to use kind of the brand, which could be, I don't know, Staffing Joe, for example, right? Or whatever brand you kind of brainstorm? Or would you rather kind of build the brand around the recruiter, the solopreneur?
Yeah, I think personally, for me, that comes down to what does the individual want, and so on and so forth. So, like, I'm a prime example. Like, Oak City Advisors, for lack of better words, is Dan's personal holding company to my entire world. So I personally built that after my career in corporate, and most people know me by that brand. when it comes to my, very similar clients that are your audience on this show versus shift fillers. However, what opened up my opportunity to basically be a co-founding partner within Shift Fillers was that brand. And then we basically, kind of aligned strategic plans, and strategy into what it is that we, wanted to be from there. But, there's plenty of people, like especially people who are, used to the LinkedIn world. So like go look at Justin Welsh's spot. He literally posts nonstop about being a 7-figure solopreneur, and honestly, that's a lot of my principle that I've taken into my personal build, is watching how he did that and how I'm supported, through all these different entities that I get, privileged to support either as an advisor, an owner, so on and so forth. However, when it comes to, let's just now take that back of how that's being presented to an end client, to me as a solopreneur, it's about a little bit of you personally, right? People are going to buy based on your background, what you bring to the table. Those things to me come back to, I'm trained in scaling up and rhythm systems strategically. So I just naturally go to these things. If you have a niche and you understand what that is from a total addressable market perspective, or what most of us call TAM, then you're basically building a plan of how you're going to go get a slice of that pie based on the strategy. However, I'll use Shift Fillers. We went to the MSP. We literally wanted to build a staffing company that was tailored to them. Why did we do it? We did it because they still control a huge amount of spend of the industry, right? So it was a lower barrier of entry into those things, which then gave us a high revenue potential output. And politely, over the last 4 years, we've grown from 0 to just shy of 30 million in revenue because of those principles. So, I think it's a little bit different based on your audience, but I think the principle is still there. If you haven't read those books, go get those books, because they tell you very clearly how you build the plans, how you get to those things. And then, I know a couple other things that may come up is, like there's things in there that help you understand cash flow cycles, and other things that help, just a general entrepreneur or solopreneur know how to run successful businesses.
And be profitable in the long run.
Exactly.
Just a little detail, right?
For sure.
And one interesting thing you mentioned just a while ago was regarding the niches. So you mentioned some of the roles that you've been working on, the mechanics, auto mechanic, if I recall well.
They're more industrial maintenance mechanics, so like people that work on like CNCs or CMMs or any type of automated, piece in the like more blue collar type stuff.
Awesome. So based on this experience, would you kind of suggest to people who are entering the IT space, for example, to niche down to a very specific segment, let's say one role or two roles, as you just kind of enumerated, but applied on IT, for example, I don't know, penetration tests in security? Like, does
exactly. I do. So like, let's go IT for a little bit, right? Like, so, there's big things, but like I've mentioned AI, I've mentioned, you just mentioned cybersecurity. I mean, those are two of the biggest things. The other things that you see, like ed tech, any type of, technology that's advancing, that's using, kind of those secondary ones we just mentioned as kind of the caveat, those things are always really critical. And like, I'll even give the audience a little bit of an example. Most people today pick up the phone, call an end client, and they go something along the lines of, hey, my name's Dan. I'm calling from XYZ company. I call in because I see you have a job on, the internet or Indeed, Career Builder, whatever, and I'm just curious, do you still have a need for somebody to help support it? No. Okay. And then they just hang up a phone. So not the best sales approach, right? So the way I tended to like going, and still to this day go about it, is more, hey, I'm Dan, I'm calling from this. I see you have this position posted, and I want you to understand this is a specialty of mine. This is basically all me or my team work on all day, every day. And I specifically have a talent pool of 10 to 20, regular whatever the number is, that I can fill this order for you in 24 to 72 hours. Would that be a benefit for you? When you use vernacular like that and you come in with the niche and you're being very clear of what's differentiating you from this to another solopreneur, another firm, it is 9 out of 10 times going to at least allow you more than 30 seconds on a call with a hiring manager or somebody else, that can at least help get you where you need to go. And that's kind of my main point.
Super cool, super cool. And if we kind of build up on what you just mentioned, who are the people who you would reach out to? Because if we kind of imagine a job board on LinkedIn, sometimes there is a person who posted the job, but it could, often it's not the decision maker. It could be a talent acquisition specialist. So
procurement, any of those types of things. Yeah. Understood completely. I'm going to also answer this into kind of two phases. So let's say solopreneur. Solopreneur, I took similar approaches. However, typically, I would normally end up dealing with either HR or direct hiring manager. And I would use tools just like everybody else to kind of get there. So my two biggest tools in this space, Apollo.io and ZoomInfo. We all know they're a little pricey, especially as a solopreneur. So my third one is always LinkedIn Navigator. It's a little bit easier starting point cost prospectively. However, those other tools had other things I got for the price point, right? That would also be where kind of I get my automations and I would get lists and help build databases. So, different kind of analogy there. However, on the agency side, I am a main supporter of building your database in hierarchy. Meaning you have C-suite, you have senior level managers, you have mid-level managers, and then you have day-to-day people. If you build your agency to where, let's say you're using brick and mortars and, it's just more traditional, even remote, but you have somewhat of a designated hierarchy in sales, meaning, junior to senior level, it's always great to build contacts at every level of the org because ideally my day-to-day salespeople were making those to the direct closer to the people in the markets. Our senior level people were communicating more with that C-suite senior level. The idea is you're yinging and yanging so that hopefully at some point you got somebody from the field making a call to the other level of the organization going, hey, I got this group that I really want to use. And then somebody else is going, oh yeah, I just talked to their owner or I just talked to their C-level. And now all of a sudden you basically meet in the middle. It just increases the probability. However, if you're asking me even more detail around like job titles, my most senior buyers, typically were procurement, HR, general managers, or typically, some type of C-level person, depending on the side of the org. And I very much play the game to every one of those things I just mentioned.
So cool, so cool. I mean, it's just so great to learn from your experience, and there is so much we could talk about. It's just kind of mind-blowing really when I kind of imagine all the people who are struggling to get the first client, right? And you are kind of deploying all these strategies. So what do you see on the market these days with kind of the market being oversaturated with recruiters? Like, do you see recruiters kind of join boards, for example, like staffing referrals, or do you see more people kind of transitioning from one industry to another? Like, what are some of the bigger trends that you see happening?
Yeah. So, I've referenced AI quite a bit on this call. To me, the biggest thing I see is people embracing that to help them either in, automating certain functions because, let's just be real, as a solopreneur, and I still struggle with it today. How do you duplicate yourself over and over and over again? It's hard. Mm-hmm. So that's where, the AI tools come in to help at least get almost the equivalent of some human interaction on the front end to help me make sure I'm spending my time on the things that I really need to be. The secondary thing, though, is, I do see, I'm going to come back to this word collaboration. I live in collaboration. So what I see a lot of people doing is I see them forming more strategic partnerships with people that are helping them get closer to where they want to be. And like those things come in forms of sometimes like joint ventures or just regular partnership agreements. But, let's just, I'll take certain, aspects of my life. I know what I'm really good at. I'm really good at this third-party automation, cloud architecture, sales strategy. I'm not great at the day-to-day detail stuff. So for me, I hired a project manager because she does way better for me in that aspect of keeping me organized. But that also put me on a position where, I only focus on sales and, kind of my automation world with my tech teams. She's helping me really take all that client facing day-to-day things and doing those things better, which then has helped me, scale much faster. In other regards, it's partner to partner or corp to corp type agreements, meaning this corporation has opportunity, but they can't meet the demand. You may be able to come into this and joint venture with them so that you own, potentially a recruiting arm or whatever it is that you bring to the table. but then that becomes a service offering that can then be resold. Those things to me have definitely helped a lot of people I know just expedite their growth, but also stay true to where they're not overcommitting or asking to, to take on things that are not what they know is a specialty. We all know there's, in the world of entrepreneurship, a lot of people maybe don't talk about on shows like this, but for me, it's opportunity cost. That opportunity cost can be exponential if you're not careful at what you're agreeing or trying to do too much. And politely, I've learned the hard way of that plenty of times in my career, where it wasn't easy to come out of those. So if you can really align your networking and understanding, where you can kind of get to those relationships and that there's mutual interest, there's some really cool mechanisms that can make that a win-win. But when you do it with the right people and have some fun with it, is when I see it, really hitting that, exponential growth type opportunity.
Awesome. So the partnerships, joint ventures, great, great. What about partnerships with companies like staffing referrals?
Yeah.
I mean, before we kicked off the podcast, we were discussing how easy it is these days to join some of these networks. So how it works for people who have never been members of such organizations?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways, I would say, and like even probably some specific niches that people may have. But most of us that are doing some type of recruiting, if it's not just permanent based, like more the contractual side, we're working with partners either in the technology side, like a staffing referrals, or another one I'm on the board for is like TimeRack, or we may have ATSs, ERPs, background vendors, funding companies. Most of these people are essentially supporting the industry holistically. And depending on what relationship you have with them, there's no harm in just going to them and saying, hey, this is what I do. Do you know anybody that might be able to utilize my service? Those things for me really just morph into what I call these like referral networks, or, other terms I call is like mailbox money. If you have the same reciprocal for them, most of us are in peer groups. Most of us see the things that come in, these channels that are, hey, what ATS, makes the most sense for my agency, or what is the best vendor for these things? People will pay you for the relationships. So for me, I've made a nice little line item on my P&L, to get into those partnerships, refer and get more into sales relationships with them, which then gives me ancillary income on top of our main revenue streams, which really for me support a lot of the extracurricular travel or other things that are, typically larger dollar ticket items for us, those types of things. So I just, once again, I'm going to tie that back to what we just talked about. It's still collaboration at the end of the day, and just, having confidence and not being scared to ask for those things. Naturally, people want to help people. And if you just, kind of, get out of the fear of being rejected, just ask. There are plenty of opportunity out there.
Yeah, yeah. And with regards to the opportunities, you also mentioned MSPs a few times. So is it also possible for a recruiter to somehow connect to such an MSP, or is it something restricted to a certain group of larger agencies?
No, I mean, I think naturally, typically you'll see it be more geared towards larger agencies, because what they're looking for, right, is the suppliers that can handle a large band of work. However, there is sections within the MSP market that are called like SOW. Right, SOW opportunities tend to be more niche marketed, meaning their traditional suppliers can't handle, or they don't have a supplier, that can handle that specific piece of it. So that's kind of what I would kind of lead with in the conversation. Once again, kind of tying back that niche, kind of talk track. However, the other way to do it is just blatantly call the larger agencies. Larger agencies will partner with solopreneurs all day, every day, especially for, large volume RPO work, or, kind of this direct sourcing world. If you have the ability to support, at the end of the day, it's just splits. And we all know, we all spend times on job boards, or, split boards and things of that nature, but it's a very similar type conversation. They have a fee, you guys contractually come up with something that makes sense, and then so on and so forth. But, those things tend to be pretty easy conversations, assuming that you can bring something to the table that they don't have today.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you also mentioned staffing referrals. Some of the companies that you mentioned at the beginning also, including Upwork. So with regards to branding on platforms like Upwork, like should recruiters also position themselves as, let's say, specialized recruiters focused on security? Like, is it not too specific on these freelance platforms or the commission split platforms?
I personally don't think so. And once again, I think those things all tie back to your personal brand, right? So, you know, 9 times out of 10, when you're on these technology platforms and the end user is looking for something, there's still algorithms that basically tie and make you relevant, right? But on those platforms, you are your personal brand. You are. And the more things that you can tailor, either your headings or, skills or attributes or projects, those things tend to be where, you're going to start to pull a little bit higher on the search mechanisms. Because if somebody specifically has that keyword that's not generalized, you're going to automatically move to the top of the rankings. So, you know, I think it's really important that you don't come off as a jack of all, that you do kind of have those things, because naturally, if you kind of just go across the board, I also feel like you tee yourself up for the first question when you're actually interviewing or talking to these potential partners to have to overcome the first objection of, man, you do a lot. Like, how do you do it? And then you're kind of already naturally kind of defending yourself. Whereas when you're more streamlined and it's much more compact, you can speak to that, and it also gives the confidence to the person that you can do the thing that they're looking for you to do, because most of these people are looking for specifically a niche type of opportunity, or somebody that meets something they can't get in the open market.
And it's so good that you just mentioned this, because I was kind of wondering whether this is just the facade, that we should kind of have as a brand, like, hey, we focus on cybersecurity, but we can also do cloud and we can also do web development. But you kind of answered it with the knowledge, right, and the talent pool also that you mentioned a while ago.
It is. I mean, and most of us that, run successful sales organizations, you know the deal. We tend to go through discovery to understand the challenges and the pain, that the company is coming to, even if I do a lot. But when I'm bringing that back to them and I have that discovery kind of to reference, I'm very much targeting my sales approach to directly address, what I took away from that discovery piece. And I think you heard it even in that sample call I did. Like, when I'm opening those things, it's very much a non-aggressive sale. A lot of people want to go straight for the jugular. Well, how is somebody supposed to trust you, to basically move you into a position if all you want to do is tell them what you're good at and sell, all yourself, and you have no clue of what the problem is that they're actually experiencing? You need to take the time to ask the right questions to understand the business case, and it will go pay dividends on the other side when you can really now target and tailor your messaging back to, here's how I'm going to exactly, do what I say I can do. But in sales, you got to be better listeners than you got to be talkers.
So true, so true. And I'm kind of wondering what happens when we extrapolate this role of the specialized recruitment consultant from someone who, like, in the past probably jumped from one role to another and now specializes in one niche, could be penetration testing in cybersecurity. Like, does it kind of bring us to the recruiter having a consulting agency, if we can call it this way? Like, is it still recruiting or does it become something that in the IT space, it was like providing like services, like IT services in that specific niche? Like, is this the future? Is where I'm kind of heading?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it more like that. I think it's a blend, but more importantly, when you can yin and yang services and recruiting, to me, it equals stickiness, right? Like, it's an automatic differentiator that you have even as a recruiter, because now all of a sudden you have other skills that may elongate your contract, right? When you tend to just be just sourcing, for example, you may have that contract just for the need today, or maybe long going. It just depends on the situation. But when you get into the services, and now all of a sudden you start having different impacts to the business, right? I obviously get, most of my agreements are long-term contracts where, I'm getting some type of consulting a fee. Then I'm getting, in the event somebody asks me to recruit, I'm getting a placement fee. If I get into the sales aspect with them, I'm getting some type of recurring revenue when on the consulting side. But for me, I'll use a little bit different. I have a lot of friends, and peers that do migration, data migration, that are helping a company move from one ATS to another ATS. Those contracts for them tend to be closer to about 20-week contracts. Because of the fact that I do more the cloud server architecture and then also third-party integrations, I tend to have my contracts years. It's not just this smaller side of the implementation. So that's kind of the analogy I'm trying to point. It's like, you get into this more of a strategic kind of role where now these people have more things, or they'll start to think about you first versus going outside. Even if you can't do it, it's still you're getting that call before somebody else, which is, ultimately the goal. And I think that also kind of brings me to my next point. If you're looking at that from a business, right, perspective, we all know typically in technology specifically, your valuation's coming off of annualized reoccurring revenue. So those things come with higher multiples, tends to be a little bit more profitable. You tend to also, when you get yourself into trouble, have the relationships to say, I'm human, we've worked together a long time, and you're not as stressed that these people are going to bounce, to another contractor or something like that. So I think there's a lot of upside to it. But there's nothing to say that if you're just into the recruiting aspect, we all know if you do well in recruiting, even if you're selling yourself in a niche, 9 times out of 10, the company's going to still call you and say, hey, I got a purple squirrel. Do you want the purple squirrel before I send it out to the other world? Right. So there's, I think that kind of explains that.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. I like how we are kind of shifting from the permanent contingent placements through the staffing world, because that's kind of more profitable in the long run, and to probably the consulting space, IT services, which probably is also the path that you have chosen, if I kind of understand correctly, with regards to your cloud services. Awesome, cool. Well, I could listen to you talk about the IT recruiting space or the recruiting industry in general for a long time, for the next 2 hours probably. But I also want to be cautious about your time. So before we kind of wrap it up, would you have any kind of final advice for people who are kind of focused on IT, or they would like to, get into IT, and they are kind of droning a bit, with kind of everything, like just the keywords that you mentioned today, it could be overwhelming, right? MSPs, SOWs, RPO, like the terminology. But then it comes with the IT terminology, and then building the niche, and then positioning, and it's like talent pool. It's like overwhelming, isn't it? So what would you suggest?
No, it is. And I think there, from an advice perspective, I always say like this, right? Like, we live in a world of digital content almost to an nth degree that it's overwhelming for most of us how much of it gets fed to us. However, there are a lot of different things, just like your podcast and other things that are available, that you guys get these, kind of industry experts to share the knowledge. One of the things I love the most about this industry is the willingness for people to share information with people for the benefit of the industry. It's like something I've never seen really in that many other industries. However, there's plenty of groups on Facebook. There's plenty of channels on YouTube. There's plenty of articles that you can pull from SIA, ASA. Knowledge is key to help build the vernacular that automatically elevate you, being looked at as a trusted advisor and somebody that knows, what they're doing versus, some generic people that just are trying to get it going, right? There's also another saying that I say a lot to my teams, and I think it'll resonate here, is opportunities don't go away, they go to other people. I tend to like being the other person, just like I'm sure a lot of people on this call would love to be, that other person. But a lot of that comes with confidence and having, no fear in going to ask for it. What I see more than anything, and especially in the sales side of these relationships, is, people will call, they'll do a great job getting discovery, but they get off that call without very clearly asking for the orders and making sure that they're asking question like, outside of pricing, is there any reason you wouldn't give me this opportunity? And taking that at table stakes to really listen so that you can hear a concern, or once again, hear what the business cases are, if you're just automatically in these calls or relationships, it doesn't matter if it's this or any other, communication level. If you already hear what you want to respond to, you're going to miss a lot of these opportunities. So if you just slow down, and I do this, you see me on this call too, still putting my hand in front of my mouth. That's like something I naturally have practiced doing when I catch myself feeling like I'm talking or, over somebody or not giving them the same courtesy. But if you think about it, right, if I'm calling you and I'm asking you for your time, you should be reciprocating that back if you're giving it to me. And so those methodologies, philosophies have just lasted a long time for me. But more importantly, when it comes to the technology side, I'll say that most things I see is people just get scared to go ahead and dive in or try something new because, they're either worried they're going to mess something up or, it's not, they don't know what they're doing. Like there's so much collateral out there at the very basics of basics to go say, how do I do this? Go to Chat GPT, go to OpenAI, do anything that essentially is going to educate you to get you some things. And then secondarily behind that, you got companies like mine and Oak City Advisors that are there to help. If you don't know, you can always hire an outside party to help get you going. And for most of us, we started those companies as service businesses because we genuinely need the industry to start adopting a lot of this for us that are, living 5-7 years into the future of innovation to get client adoption and, get other things, pertinent to seeing these things actually, get to the levels that we want to see them that make all of our lives easier.
Well, this is very inspiring, and I feel like I'll need to rewatch our interview now again just to take some more notes than I did. So where can people connect with you? I'll obviously share your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, but is there any other website where people can find you?
Yeah, there is. We have our own website for Oak City. It's oakcityadvisorsllc.com. You can actually get there from our LinkedIn page. Also, I'm pretty sure my contact information is on my shiftfillers.com website, so you guys can link me there. And then I'm on Facebook, most groups. I think a lot of this audience is in a lot of the groups. Most of you can find me in groups, but you can use any communication method for me, and me or my team will go ahead and reach out and try to help as much as we can.
Awesome, super cool. Well, thanks a lot for sharing all your insights, tips, ideas, and yeah, I'm really grateful for everything that you have been doing for the community over the last years.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to being more engaged with this group, and anything I can do to help you in the podcast, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Well, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.